How you doing, everybody? This is Renz, and I want to welcome you to the Age of Aquarius. I have been inspired recently after having conversations with one of my children. Not so much as to give structure, as to create a religion, but more to codify, just ever slightly, still allowing for the freedom of thought, the system of understanding the universe to which I follow. In this, we will spend quite a bit more time discussing how to exist in this universe as a player and not as a piece. To not be moved about, but to recognize that it is you who moves the universe. We have entered into this time frame at the cusp of the Age of Aquarius. Many people are pinpointing it that it started at different time frames. It started in the 1980s, it started in 2000, it started in 2020, 2012, or 2020. No one can say exactly when the Age of Aquarius starts. For those who don't know, the Age of Aquarius is the fact that from our perspective of looking at the sun, when it rises and when it sets, that it rises and sets and exists within a zodiac. That there is an elliptical line that the sun rises and sets within this zodiac for approximately about 2100 years. Some will say about 1984 years, because instead of the 12-month calendar, they look at the 13th month calendar, the lunar calendar. Now, when we come to an understanding of this, what we are saying is not that we are affected by the stars, but we affect the stars from our perspective. Many at this juncture may say that I believe in astrology. Well, astrology is not a belief. It's not like a religion. You see, a religion requires you to believe in something, whereas astrology is more of a language. And although I am not fluent in the language of astrology right now, I know enough. I understand enough based on the hermetics and alchemy to be able to get the gist of the language. And in the gist of the language of the Age of Aquarius, we are moving in, we are in the in-between space of the Age of Pisces and the Age of Aquarius. Now, this video is going to be relatively short compared to my normal video, so we will definitely have to dive deeper into these concepts later. But for right now, let's just take an overview of the Age of Pisces and the Age of Aquarius and where we are headed. What is coming next? So the Age of Pisces has been, and understand, the ages move in opposite direction of our monthly calendars as far as the zodiacs are concerned. But the Age of Pisces, which many will say began with the coming of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, but others will go as far back and say it began with the 13th coming of Krishna and the coming of Siddhartha, which is the Buddha. Many would say that. Now, I would agree that it began with the time frame of the 13th Krishna, Buddha, Lao Tzu, as well as the Yeshua and Muhammad, because what we're looking at is not a one spot covers all situation. That as we enter into a new age, it is exemplified by different aspects around the world. At no point in time can one group manifest itself all over the world at once. It was an impossibility. So it manifested itself in different lines of thought that form similar lines of thought. It is amazing how people from the far east of what was called the Western world had similar understanding and thought. People south of the Sahara had similar thoughts to those in the far east. We know that information did travel, but it did not travel as well as it could travel today. But the thought process, the consciousness, which is what we're exploring, that traveled, that moved. That didn't require an internet, an airplane, a telephone, or anything of that sort. Consciousness is energy. It's energy. And we will discuss that even more so as we go through how we have moved from an understanding of matter to energy. But the age of Pisces, represented by the fish, when we look at these things, not literally, but symbolically, and all the writings of these eras, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Bhagavad Gita to the Upanishads to the Torah, the Gospels, the Quran, all these writings was written on the walls of Egypt, the clay tablets in Samaria. All these writings have the meanings within them. They're symbolic. They have this symbolic meaning. Not everything is meant to be taken literal. Most things aren't meant to be taken literally. So the idea of the fish, Pisces, and things representing the Piscean mindset, the Piscean consciousness, is a consciousness of grouping together grouping together and just going with the flow of things, moving as the energy is flowing, just coming into agreement, not because you came into knowledge, but coming into agreement through the authority of government, through the authority of warfare, through the authority of conquest. You see, the Piscean age represents that, shows you that when you look at the history of it, an overview, of course, you can find your parts here and there. Oh, there was a Renaissance here. There was a free thinking here. But in most situations, free thinking, opposing thought to governmental backed systems, were met with harshness, was met with violence, was met with murder. When Irenaeus came to the Council of Nicaea with a different thought process on the Trinity, the essence of Yeshua, he was met with brutality. He was beaten in order to sign the Nicene Creed. Not more than 100 years later, we see that the Gnostics, who were ahead of their time in understanding knowledge brings you closer to your divinity, were brutalized and murdered in grotesque numbers. We see these things happen, but in a sense, they give us our basis, our foreground, they give us our foundation. They give us something to look back on and say, we move into the age of Aquarius. We pull from this small ancient group who lost. They lost physically, they lost politically, but they win consciously. You see, the age of Pisces, we did not question too much of what goes on. And when we do question, we conform our new thought based on the old thought. You see, the Protestant Reformation that Martin Luther did not intend to start became a conformed version of Catholicism. A conformed version of Catholicism. When Siddhartha started the Buddhist movement, it still became a conformed version of Hinduism. The same with the Tao. Although the Tao expresses that when you no longer need Buddhism, there is the Tao. The Tao will give us structure to move towards the age of Aquarius, but the Tao still hangs upon the conformality of Buddhism. But this age of Aquarius is an age of knowledge and questioning. It's an age of revealing. It's an age of removing and replenishing. You see, the Piscean age, we conformed. But when you look at the symbolism of the age of Aquarius, what you see is a man pouring out a pail of water. We must think about this for a second. When Yeshua was asked about where they should go and what they should do going into Jerusalem, he expressed to his apostles, as they became known as, that find a man carrying a pail of water, and into his house we will reside. So the Son is telling the 12 to find a man that after he has that he went in order to complete his mission, and when he is gone, to find a man carrying a pail of water, and in his house we will reside. Well, we know in the zodiac, houses are the zodiac is divided up into 12, and each one has a house. A man carrying a pail of water. Now, to most of us today, that has very little meaning to it. But to the people of that time frame, or those who understand the language of astrology, remember, astrology is not something to believe, it is a language of communication. The language of astrology, men did not carry water. It was seen in this patriarchal world as a woman's work. In no other time frame were men involved with carrying water. When Moses came to the well, it was only women. When Yeshua went to the well, it is only women. When the Buddha rested under the Bodhi tree, it was a young girl who brought him water and refreshment. It is always in all cultures, in this Piscean age and before, even in the age of the bull and the previous ages, women carried the water. So for Yeshua to say, find a man carrying water, if this was taken literally, the apostles would have said that would more than likely be an impossibility. We will be sleeping under the stars. There is no house that we will go into. But this is an astrological commentary. Aquarius is represented by a man pouring out a pitcher of water. But let's look a little bit deeper. Pouring out a water, a man, water. In the Hermetics, the man represents the masculine energy. The water represents the feminine energy. You see, only women carry birth, new life, nurturing life through water. Although the information of bringing about a new life is carried in the male through his sperm, it is in the egg of the woman and in the womb of the woman that it is nurtured, that it manifests itself, that it becomes. So the man is providing the instructions, providing the information, is pouring out the water. The water is the feminine energy that has nurturing power, that has creative power. And in the symbol, the man is pouring the water on the earth. Now we know that when water comes down, as the Tao says, it can either flow or it can crash. When pouring out water from a higher point, we know that the water initially crashes. This is why we have turmoil during this time of cusp, while there have been turmoil as we've been moving into the age of Aquarius, because the water crashing disrupts the current ground. You see, when it hits the ground, the current structure of the ground moves itself. It's no longer does it stay in its sediment, but it must move and is crushed. So when the water hits the ground from the pouring, then it causes a disruption. That disruption is the world that we lived in, the world that we've been living in, the separation of man, the warring of man, the finding of separation and anger and frustration, class warfare, financial warfare that we have been living through. This is the water crashing. But that same water that crashes removes. We see the removal right now. Now we're in the process of the removal. We saw governments and regimes that were totalitarian. We're seeing them over the last few hundred years being removed. We've seen the kings and queens being removed. We've seen dictators being removed. We've seen even parliamentary governments that acted as dictators being removed. And we're seeing now at local levels, people, mayors, governors being removed. Statues that symbolizes a time frame of dominance of one man over another as a racial matter being removed. Laws that allow for those to crush another being removed. The water removes. But what does it leave behind? It leaves behind new fertile ground. The ancient Egyptians discussed and built their culture during a golden age, a golden mindset, around the fact that every year after the winter solstice, that the floods would come down from the mountains of Kenya and Sudan and flood the Nile Valley. When the Nile Valley flooded, at first they saw the destruction, but then they realized that it left new minerals, new sediment. It left new ground that was very fertile. That after the destruction, it brought about life. So they built their societies in such a way to understand how to utilize this new life. Here's the thing. We are seeing that now. It amazes some people, but others it does not. The entire Black Lives Matter movement has been around. We've seen Rodney King get beaten. Many have known that black people in America have faced police brutality. Many have seen that people of color around the world has faced brutalities. Why is it now that the world recognizes it and is in uproar and is in turmoil and is looking to remove the old in order to have new sediment? Those who just saw it on the news and assumed that, oh, they must have done something wrong. Those who saw it and sat back and said, well, you have an equal opportunity. Why are you still struggling? Why are you still doing this? Now, why do you still live in abject poverty? Why do you still kill and have violence in your communities? Well, now we're realizing we all have violence in our own communities. That the average person will be physically harmed by someone who looks exactly like them. But it has been personified in the groups that have been oppressed more so than those who have not. But now there is a great removal of that mindset. Although we see the physical removal of statues and laws, and we've seen people protesting and saying that the police must change, that the government must change, that the people in power must change. Now that we see these things happening, what we see literally is symbolic of our mindset, our consciousness changing. That our consciousness of the world is starting to see that no human deserves to be treated in any form or fashion that is subhuman. You see, in the age of Pisces, slavery was okay. Slavery was part of the culture. Although it came in different forms, we saw indentured servitude move to lifetime slavery, move to brutal slavery, move to racial slavery. We've seen the progress of it, and we've seen it dismantled. We've seen the consciousness of the world only in the last not even a full 200 years, being dismantled as an acceptable way of life, to now just being something more hidden. And we are seeing the removal of the things that cause the consciousness to fall into that despicable place. But we are also seeing the revitalization of the mind, the consciousness that says that we must remove things that continue to perpetuate this idea on a conscious level. And that is moving us into a golden age, the age of Aquarius. In these series of videos, along with the other type videos that I do, we will discuss how we move in this consciousness. That there are people like myself who are not the bringers of this age of Aquarius to the full consciousness, but we are merely harbingers of it. That we will provide instruction that will not see its fullness while I am alive, but it will see its fullness later on. Just as John had to come before Yeshua, there had to be someone first that moves the needle. We will move this needle through the understanding of the Hermetics and alchemy. That understanding the universal laws takes away from the idea of race, takes away the idea of gender being something that is hard-coded as male and female, but that we all have masculine and feminine energy. You see, the age of Aquarius, the man pouring out a pail of water, is the feminine and masculine energy working together to revitalize the consciousness of man and revitalize the universe, to move us into a golden age. This is our masculine and feminine joining together, the law of gender at work, so that all the other laws may fulfill themselves. We will dig deeper into these over the coming years, and I look forward to this journey. So please like this video, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon so that you'll get notifications when a new video drops. When I do lives, you can participate and we can have Q&A throughout. If you want to support the channel, go to my Patreon and support the channel. I greatly appreciate it. But in the meantime, in between time, remember you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good vibrations, good journey.